Hey there, it's Jason Stahl, and we're here at Babcox World Headquarters in Akron, Ohio for the ADAS Roundtable discussion sponsored by AUTEL. And surrounded by me, I have some of the preeminent ADAS experts in the country. To my left here is Frank Phillips, who is with ADAS Solutions USA. I have James Rodas with OEM Calibration. I have Vinny Petrino with AUTEL. I have Stuart Peregrine with AUTEL. And I have Josh Fuller with Fuller Collision Group and ADAS Diagnostic Solutions. And I also have another Josh here, Josh Ronak with Tag Calibrations. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So, when I talk about ADAS, I like to start with this question. It's not like these ADAS equipped vehicles came about yesterday, right? We've been working on them for quite some time. So I just want to ask each of you where you feel the competency level is in the collision industry when it comes to addressing electronics repairs in these spaceships we're working on. Calibration, scanning, reprogramming, all that stuff. Where does the competency level stand right now? Because we've been working on these cars for some time, but they're still sophisticated and they're getting more sophisticated. So why don't we start with you, Frank?
Sure. So, gosh, Jason, we could probably spend our whole entire day talking about that one single question, right? I would tell you that the competency is very all over the board. We can go from independent collision repairers who are local, don't have a lot of outreach to education, all the way up to the top shelf repairers across the country, MSOs who have full access to lots of training and lots of information. And you cover the gamut of that knowledge and awareness. And so you get into the digital space and you're talking about scanning. It baffles me when I stop and think that we've theoretically been scanning cars in the collision space since about 2010, 2011, when it started grabbing on, right? 2014, it really kind of rocket shipped. And here we are, 2025, and we still have shops who are not scanning cars yet. It's unbelievable to me. And if they do scan, they don't comprehend the output of that scan. They because the insurance company pays a half an hour, they scan the car. They don't understand that there's a purpose of scanning and understanding what that pre-scan is and what it's telling them and how that leads into all the things ADAS and all the things digital that we do to a car. So it's we still have a lot of work to do. We've made great progress. I don't want to be the naysayer and say here that we haven't improved, but we definitely still, I think that's why we're all here today, is to figure out how we can help bring the bar up to the next level.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier, out of the 30,000 some shops, only 2,500 get it. Is that what you said?
That's a frank number. My experience over my career and chasing body shops for an OE program, I was in a lot of body shops, and you got to go into a lot to find one that really gets it A to B all the way to the end of the alphabet.
James, how do you feel about this?
About the same. I mean, it's really scary to think that, like Frank said, there's a lot of shops that still don't scan, don't read them. You get done, you go to calibrate a car, and you got an issue. Well, we got a problem here. Can I see your pre-scan? Bobby, did we pre-scan this car? If you can get it, it clear as day that things are wrong. The airbag's blown or whatever, and it's like, guys, come on now. We need to do it. We need to read it. We need to know what's going on here. We've been doing calibrations since 2014. And to hear people say that, oh, that doesn't need it, there's not a light on. I mean, we hear that all the time, and it's not just managers, it's owners of the business. And we were talking earlier about education. We all go to education stuff, and the amount of people that are fit those is so minute. It's just really scary that, okay, why don't you guys get it? Because you don't educate. You're working in your business every day instead of occasionally working on your business and getting educated and just trying to improve. All of us are trying to improve. I try to improve as a person daily. Let's pick something and try and get a little better. And that's what shops need to focus on, in my opinion.
I'm glad you mentioned that. We call it the dashlight myth in the magazine. It's very prevalent. Vinny, what are your thoughts about what the competency levels in the collision industry on ADAS?
The levels need to grow. We're definitely lacking when it comes to understanding what these codes mean on these pre-scans. Understanding those codes would, one, lead to faster repairs, more accurate repairs, no surprises when it comes to, resubmittals for more parts or more repairs on these cars from the insurance companies. But also, when you're scanning these cars, the repairs that are not associated with codes or dash lights. Again, ADAS, half of it's electrical, the other half is physical. So if you have a car that's being taken apart, there might not be any codes, there might not be any dash lights, but that still warrants, or there might still be need for ADAS calibration, because you're pulling that bumper, you're pulling, that panel, you're doing an alignment, you're doing something physical to the car that might not trigger a code, but still requires a calibration.
I think what we see is the physical check piece sure becomes a missed item because it's not on a scan. It's there that requires service information. It requires more investigation. Time's the killer in every shop anyway. We're trying to get cars back to these customers in a timely fashion. There's usually a rental that's attached to it that has a time-based, I only get it for 2 weeks at the most. And so that's as a technician, as a shop, you're like at a real disadvantage, right? That's why I think, looking at this, what's the work that needs to be done? Like look at it from the end point and then go back and say, okay, these are all the things that we really have to address. And that's where that education piece comes in. Having the right tools is really essential, right? Scanning is just a little bit of this process. That's the crazy thing, right? I'm thinking about that. The scanning, although super important, it's just a small piece of the whole process. And the work that actually gets done is diagnosing the actual repair of wiring if needed, right? How many times have you looked at a fender and the wiring is impacted? You don't see that once the car is finished, right? But you sure notice it if something doesn't work. And so there's just so much for the technicians to consider. And that skill level, to Prank's point, everybody's point, is just so across the board. So
I think the level of competency, I agree with pretty much why when you said the level of competency needs to be risen and raised across the industry. But I think a lot of it is you can't go beyond what you can't control, right? I think a lot of it's market driven. What type of vehicles do you have in that market? What type of leaders do you have of these collision shops? And the variables that come into play. Are we talking downtown San Diego? Are we talking Vancouver? Are we talking rural Tennessee, right? That shop owner, leader, and those technicians are going to repair that vehicle the best way they know how, all right? Because that's the passion, is to utilize as many resources as possible to fix this vehicle correctly. Nobody wants to put out a bad product, right? I do.
Yeah.
And so I think that, when you talk about the competency and how that's gauged across the country, you're really got to take a tough look at what's that market? What type of vehicles are in that market? What are the technicians? And is that a large MSO, a regional MSO, or is that more of an independent market? Coming from New England, there aren't a lot of MSOs in the New England area. So you've got a tremendous amount of independent facilities. And the success of being able to, like you said, be able to repair a vehicle, both mechanical, collision, diagnostic, troubleshoot wiring, really comes into play of the leader and continuous education. These cars are changing.
super fast.
You look back, nobody can predict the changes. You have certain companies that will say, severity is going to be down. Well, those are the same companies that failed to forecast premiums because of the increased cost of calibrations, among other things during the 2020. But there's a lot that we can't control. I believe it's got to be the leadership skill level of the people in charge and to what resources you can utilize that we have at our fingertips. I think right now we've got more resources than ever to do what we need to do to, pretty much rise the tide. With the rising tide, all ships will come up.
Just want to talk about too, Josh, your family history with your shop. I think it's 100 years old or older, right? And along the way, every time there was a change in the automotive industry, a new profit center, you guys jumped on it. And that's kind of how your calibration center got birthed in 2019, 2020, when these cars were coming in and you realized you needed to do something with this. And I think that's a beautiful story, and that's kind of how, there's a need, there's a demand, and you filled it. And it wasn't easy. You didn't know what you were doing at first, and then you just got more expertise as you went along. Just talk to me a little bit about that ADAS calibration center that you built and kind of supplemented your shop with.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it. I'm fourth generation owner of Fuller Automotive Companies in Auburn. So we're going on 111 years. That's all started by my great grandfather. It was a transition from literally horse and buggy over to the ignition wiring. And all through the years and generations, we are dead set identifying entrepreneurs. Anything having to do with four wheels on an engine, we're on top of. So gas stations, tow companies, used car lots, OEM dealerships, aftermarket sales and manufacturing products, mechanical repair, collision repair. So over the years, it's, as entrepreneurs, again, locally, tribal, we've started one community. And that was our passion, was back in the 40s, 50s. My grandfather ran the tow company, and he was out at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning towing for the local state police. Back in the 50s, if the local police crashed one of their cruisers, my grandfather would give them a car right off the lot to use. Throw a bubble light on, and here we go, right? So it really comes down to passion serving the community in developing the people. We've got some great employees over the years that worked for us that are third, fourth generation as well. And some of the customers coming in, 80, 90 years old, God love them, still driving. You think of the different levels of different buildings that we've been able to service all the way through. So identifying, what our passion is and what we need to do to continually serve the customer. When calibrations came out, as we continue to grow our collision business, anything you look at, there's always new equipment. There's always a new opportunity. Is it a fad? Is it something, pre or post scanning? This isn't about fast. This is just another, body shops need a way to charge for more. We started looking at it and say, we saw our cycle time rise and our CSI drop. So, and this is in the late 2015 to 2018, 19. And so we did a legit study on why is our cycle time increasing and why is our CSI dropping? And what we found was that the majority of the vehicles had to go to the dealer because we weren't capable of kind of getting the ball over the 1 yard line. Take the ball all the way down the field and then boom, red zone, tough deal. We weren't getting the solutions that we needed from the dealer, and then just more and more research, and working with companies like AUTEL, and pretty much scouring. We had one full-time employee that literally was his job. He was a writer, but 90% of the time he was researching and playing around with the cars and seeing how these calibrations need to be done. And it was at that point that we realized we had some hard lessons, some safety lessons that put some of our employees and customers in danger because vehicles weren't being repaired correctly. You talk about factory versus aftermarket windshields, that's no joke. Until we get the proper players to be able to see this firsthand, and that's, we believe, help set the market in that area. And again, it's a drive and a passion for knowing that when you walk that customer out to their car, their vehicle is repaired correctly and safely, and that we're doing everything we can in our power to gain access to all the tools and resources necessary to fix that vehicle.
Josh, are collision repairers fumbling in the dark still on ADAS, or are they giving nuclear physicists a run for their money?
Man, option B is tempting, but when I think about education and how that progresses through the repair industry as it pertains to ADAS specifically, I think about performing these operations the way intended from the manufacturer and doing them to check a box. One of the things we brought up earlier was pre and post scans, and a pre and post repair scan is different than a pre and post calibration scan. So let's be honest, it's a completely different product. But a pre and post repair scan, are we doing it because insurance pays us 30 minutes? Or are we doing it because we're educating ourselves the level of repair necessary on that vehicle when that vehicle's through to the end of the repair process, are we scanning that car looking for open circuits, for stuff unplugged? Or are my calibration guys going to be plugging stuff in for the body shop that's not necessarily part of the calibration procedure, but more and more it's, we're that end step, the last touch point.
Yep.
Yeah. And there are some body shops that are very proactive and, exceedingly sensitive to the liability around calibrations. And there's some that, through no fault of their own, just have not had the exposure necessary. And, one of the things I really like to think about when I talk to body shops that are on the cusp of joining the 21st century when it comes to understanding the liability is that, when we started setting standards for airbags and how those systems needed to be repaired and the types and processes that got put in place to ensure that when those systems detonated in a car or needed to be replaced because they were potentially impacted in a collision, that we follow the necessary procedures. But airbags protect who? The occupants of the car, right? Who does ADAS protect?
Yeah, the other.
ADAS protects the occupants in the car and everyone that shares roadway space with that vehicle. So the impact is exponentially larger.
You showed a great video last night. That saved both sides.
Exactly. Yep. It's our kids, right?
Yeah.
So, it's not just a paycheck or, an insurance job. You're gonna put your kids on the road with that vehicle, whether or not they're in it is irrelevant.
1,000%.
Yeah,
You mentioned the scanning fact, and then we'll talk about that, right? We see it on the estimate, it's pre and a post, and the industry has this misconception that we just scan the car 2 times. How many times do we scan a car when we work on it again?
Right.
Those are times, at least
50.
As many times as I can click the button.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's that
One
that
DV.
misunderstanding of exactly how we're assessing that digital life on that vehicle. It comes right back to what Josh just said.
You mentioned something, Josh, doing something over and over, and some of these shops can't be blamed because they haven't had exposure to this yet. It's plastic repair, welding. The more you do it, you have the guy that does it, right? And the more he does it, the better he gets at it. But in this arena, it feels like there's also constant research and constant learning. It's not just if you could be doing it every day, but you could be doing it wrong, right? So it just seems like to me that I think the shops that got on this earlier are perhaps more down the road as far as their competency, because Mitch Becker talks about it all the time in the pages of Body Shop Business. It's just trial and error and learning, and there is a certain aptitude that you have to have that a lot of guys don't have for electrical troubleshooting, this and that, because there could be so many reasons why calibration fails, but what is it? So I think it's just the shops that got it, and it's not too late. The shops that aren't in it yet need to get into it, but they need to do it right and learn and research and all that.
And for every way, sorry, go ahead. It's never too late, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the evolution of what we're going to be faced with for the rest of the motoring life cycle, right? These systems are just going to continue to evolve and improve and change and become more capable.
It's a tough transition too. We've been asked to. There was a guy at a conference who had a great analogy. He said, we used to be the cool guys with the white T-shirts and the cigarettes rolled up in the sleeve and the grease in our hair, working on cars, and now we're the geek, the computer geek that we kicked sand in his face. It's a very tough transition to go from welding and bending metal and sanding to fixing computers. It's a whole different skill set. So. We can't hardly be blamed in the industry for maybe being behind the curve, but there's no excuse for not researching, learning, doing your homework, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So I want to talk about repair planning, guys. And, there's some shops that still don't do an adequate repair plan for the body structure, right? Fixing, what parts need to be replaced. But now we need to do an electronic blueprint. And I don't know how many shops are doing those, probably not a whole lot. But what happens is, as you know, and you've probably heard this term in the industry, wash bay diagnostics, right? There's a problem ends up when the car is in the wash bay and it's ready to be delivered to the customer, and we got a problem because we didn't do an electronic blueprint. So talk to me, guys. Anybody can start. Do you guys do an electronic blueprint in your shop, and how does that, is it separate from the the other blueprint you do for the regular repair outside electronics, or is it together, and who does it, and just all those details?
I think it's different everywhere, right? I mean, when it comes in, first thing you got to do is scan. You got to read the scan. You need to diag whatever codes are in there. Was this accident related, not accident related? You got to inform the customer. If it's not accident related, hey, you got a misfire, you might need to go see your local mechanic or the dealership that you go to. Car gets repaired. It's got to be scanned while you're putting it together, not once, not way at the end, because you have to know before it comes to us if there's something wrong, right? I mean, we have to have that heads up before it gets to us, because otherwise you're driving back across town to, hey, you got something going on here. Do you want to pay us, or are you going to do it? And then we're going to scan it multiple times through the process, and the shop should scan it again when they get it back after it's been driven. We're all going to test drive our cars, but it's going to get more miles on between. Sometimes these things don't pop up for multiple miles. So the shop really should scan it again at the end. Mm-hmm. Is the end bill payer going to pay for all those? They should, but that's just a conversation that doesn't go very well. You don't have to do that. We do have to do that. I mean, it's our customers deserve that. So
I would say, Jason, honestly, it's all of that stuff, right? And so ADAS Solutions, we provide service to customers at all different stops along the way. We do business with a lot of hail companies, and those guys are traditionally, they don't scan cars to start with. They're pushing dents. They're R&I a few things maybe, and their concept is we're not really affecting that car. We're not unhooking anything. And so as time has evolved and gremlins pop up on a car on the digital system, and now that the hail company's like, oh man, how the customer's telling me that's my fault, and I don't have any history to back that up. So we've supported those folks and started doing pre-scans for them to help them, give them a bill of health on the car before they ever touch it. We have customers who don't call us until the car's ready to be calibrated. We have customers who live somewhere in the middle of that. So our technicians, the process with ADAS Solutions is, if we're called to get a car, we scan the car before it leaves the property. We do a complete inspection. We document the condition of that car on the digital aspect as well as the physical aspect. And so that goes into our system. And if it's not ready to go, then we let the repairers know that, hey, you got this problem going on. We can diagnose it. We can take it and we can continue down the path. Just understand where this comes out on the end with the build, right? So I think it kind of depends on where you fit in the ADAS space, and if you're supporting internal, if you have a third-party reach where you're like, we don't do collision work. Mm-hmm. We are a calibration company and a diagnostic company and programming company. So we have a lot of different varieties of partners, and so that's I think that's where we are. It's a new frontier. We're all pioneering here, and we're kind of trudging that path. And I don't think there's a certain road yet. So.
Josh, you're a collision shop. Do you do an electronic blueprint?
Yes, it's fun. This is a great question because you're so many different tangents we can go off here. So I'll try to keep it not long-winded. But being on the collision side, again, this is how we found the need for diagnostic solutions, and how do we target any issues that come up with calibrations, right? First statistic, 20 years ago, what is the ratio, number of admin to number of technicians, right? What do we talk, maybe one admin to 4 technicians? Yeah, okay, sure. Right now, I think it's swapped. Right now, it's swapped. It's almost, I would say almost 2 to 1, 2 admin to 1 technician now. And you think about why, right? We're not even going to tangent of compensation and reimbursement. But again, the comparison is so similar to the medical industry in practicing medicine on humans, right? You've got these cars that, for whatever reason, suffered a loss, okay? What variables came into play? Where is the car going for repairs? What type of car is it? What type of technology is on the car? Looking at the digital blueprint from first point of contact, are those pictures taken by the customer? Are they sent over to the collision repair shop electronically? Who's looking at those pictures? Seeing the vehicle in person to determine whether or not any parts need to be ordered, when that vehicle essentially can be scheduled into the shop at that time, addressing the concerns of the customer. You know as well as I that the number one concern of a customer with that crash car is not that crash car.
Okay, it's life beyond that, and what this is, how this is hindering, their life from there. Addressing all of it and building, really almost the triage of find out what's going on and how do we properly address everything that needs to do with that car. And all this is digitally recorded in some way, shape, or form. And fortunately, we've had some really great resources and companies help collision centers be able to do this, to streamline. What we like to do is, you write out, all your customer touch points, and then you pick and choose how can you improve each one. A lot of it is the customer intake process because, Thursday, Friday, you try to deliver that car, something goes wrong. Where can you pinpoint it back to the process? Where did we fail? Where did we go wrong? A lot of time was a pre-wash? Was there a pre-scan? During disassemble for repair, was it properly imprinted? What procedures were pulled and what was applied? And then in-process scan was at there's so many levels that go into, to your point, of the repair process that you drop the ball on step 4, you're going to see it at step 9.
Yep.
And a lot of times that when you're dropping the ball at 1 and 2, can you imagine being misdiagnosed the minute you walk into emergency room, and then you continue to get treated for that misdiagnosis all the way through?
And not to be better at the end.
It's a crazy comparison, but thankfully, we see a lot of processes, a lot of tools, a lot of variables that are helping collision centers get to this point. And that is our sole goal in our calibration company, is to help collision centers to that point. I don't think it's to the point because we're getting so far down the road of specialization and to be able to keep up with technology that a calibration facility is on a completely different planet than a collision center.
Yeah.
So that there's just continues to be that large disconnect, and you've got to decide, as a leader in a collision center, what you want to focus on.
I'd love to give a little perspective. Like some of the things that I see is we work with a lot of collision centers, but state by state, what's an interesting thing that I have seen is states that have their own state inspections just to get your license for the vehicle. Think about this a second. There's safety systems that need to be calibrated or reset that may or may not be compensated for, right? That could mean your windows. That could mean, the sunroof, your lights, headlights, taillights, all that stuff potentially needs a reset. Potentially won't show up on a scan, say, hey, you got a code here, but it is part of the procedure that, and what it's amazing. I tend to see states that have some of that state inspection stuff, they're more in tune with that than other states. And rural versus metro, there is some weird things going on out there, right? So, but that digital plan may or may not, show all those things. So having a good identification tool on the front side, making sure you're going through all those resets. Think about it. If you return a car and the windows don't operate, that's a safety problem, right? And it needs addressed before it goes back. Whether it happened in the collision or not, that's not the debate. The debate is, it needs fixed before it goes back. So, but I just think it's interesting that I see it regionally and state by state, even some of these shops that take it a next step further or not.
I think the calibration store is the perfect avenue to close out that accountability loop, right? So if we're making sure that the vehicles on the road are as safe as possible, at least from the perspective of a repair center, not even taking into consideration sensor degradation over time. We're talking about cars now where the average, what's the average age of a vehicle in repair? 6-7 years, average age of a vehicle in repair, plus or minus. Yeah. Right. So as that bell curve shifts forward, we're going to see a heavier density of ADAS on vehicles over time. And as a result, over time, the bell curve of functioning systems on the road will trend towards non-functional over functional. So either administrations need to step up their game and put legislation together that protects the consumer from sensors that are lying to you on their effectiveness, I should say. Something has to be put in place, like a biannual smog check, some sort of certificate of calibration, whether you're buying a car off of a used lot, who knows how long it's been sitting there, getting cooked in the sun, who knows how accurate. Some manufacturers have done a really good service and put out technical specifications for waveform back into the radar. So you can test some manufacturers.
And to be honest, they can all give us that. They're just not giving it as
Agreed.
Agreed. The access to that.
Some of them have been really proactive about giving companies like us the opportunity to check for functionality rather than just calibrate, point, shoot, check a box. They're like, okay, so this sensor's got a weak signal. You know, it's been on the car for 8 years. Maybe it's time. And they do give you parameters for what's acceptable. And I can speak from first-hand experience. We've replaced sensors, not because they were impacted in a collision, not because they were just not functional, period, the end, but that they were functioning beyond what they were intended.
But and let's be real, everything electronic now doesn't last as long as it used to.
A shelf life is a shelf life.
Yeah, and insurance company, bill payers, at the end of it, they're going to say, well, there's nothing wrong with that when it came in. Well, there is now. I'm telling you right now that we're trying to calibrate it, program it, whatever. It's not happening. We need a new one. I didn't make it. I just want it to work when it leaves here. So, I mean, degradation's real.
And who's responsible for that cost?
What's that?
And who's responsible for the cost?
Right.
Sometimes it's a $1,200 sensor.
Right.
And if it wasn't collision related, who pays?
Well, Uptime is one thing, but the ability to test for it and validate whether it needs to be replaced and then, of course, pay for, that's one of the big things that we're missing in the industry today is the information, the specs from the manufacturers of these sensors to be able to say, right, this sensor is good, it's going to keep our customers safe, or this sensor is on its last breath and we should replace it before it fails on the customer mid-drive. So that's one of the things that we really need.
Our conversations progress far past how to properly read a post scan, I think.
I thought we were sitting in the NASA headquarters for a second. It's not too far from here. You lost me there a little bit. But I'm glad you brought up calibration stores. How many are there out there? Is it the best option for a body shop? Or is it maybe the option if whatever problem they're dealing with is just over their head, they send it to you guys, the experts? An in-house calibration at their shop has just left them befuddled. Is the dealer the best option? But let's talk about the stores for a second, because that's what Tag Calibration says. How many did you have?
I think we've got about 8.
Okay.
Plus or minus. We have a few that service our internal body shops, and then we have a few that service out-of-network body shops.
Okay.
I might be biased, but, I'm of the opinion that the calibration center, a brick-and-mortar, purpose-built calibration center, is the perfect solution for a body shop. Most of the manufacturers will tell you that they want an environment that's devoid of metal. Well, how many body shops do you know that are devoid of metal objects within 6 meters in front of the car? If you're talking about Acura and Honda, which make up a considerable portion of, vehicles on the road, right? Their market share is enormous. So if we're gonna make sure that we can handle those sorts of vehicles, we need an environment that is prepped for that. And like I said before, some body shops have been extremely proactive in their creation of calibration space within their own businesses. And I commend them for doing that. I will never be the person that says, a body shop should not be calibrating cars, because absolutely they should be. We're motivated to close that liability loop.
Mm-hmm.
I would second that 100%, Jason. And having visited a lot of collision centers across the country, Josh hit on a key point. And you can all think about the shops we've been in. The average square foot of a body shop in the country is about 5,000 square feet. If you look at some of the OE standards and what's required for calibration, now I think that there's some forward thinking in some of these numbers, right? We all know we can calibrate in a 30 by 10 foot space 65-70% of the things that are on that car. But there are manufacturers who are saying you need a 30 by 40 by 60 square foot space, 2,400 square feet. Now you have to impact the whole entire production of that collision center if you're going to be able to calibrate in that space. Got to clear it out, remove the metal. Are the floors even remotely level? Is that
What percentage of those shops have floor drains in them?
Yeah, 100, right? 100% of a body shop has a floor drain. So those are all factors, I think, that, to Josh's point, if a shop is capable, if the shop put the forethought in to design the space purposefully, it makes all the sense. The challenge is the cost per square foot. If you're paying rent on that building and lease, that cost per square foot in a collision center is a lot more expensive than the cost per square foot that we're paying for a calibration center in most cases. So how does that business owner make that math work and changing the production cycle to get those cars calibrated? It's Friday afternoon and the car's got to get done. The guy in the prep booth still needs to buff and polish, and the guy in the paint booth is still trying to get cars out the door. I would tell you probably 75% of the body shops I've walked in that are doing their own calibration. They're doing it in front of the paint booth. That's the busiest space on Friday. How do you interrupt that production cycle and become effective, right? I think it's an interesting perspective when you look at, there's a lot of ways to look at proper. And I think if it's purposefully thought about, a collision center absolutely can do it. And folks that do what we do can help them get there. We can help them assess their environment. We offer that. If we have a customer who's like, and I'd like to do some of this on my own, I can get a trahedral, right? It's not that hard. I can position that. I see what you're doing. Well, let's come in and check your floor. Let's come in and see where your lift is positioned. You realize that you have a wall full of toolboxes and that trahedral is taking a radar sound, right? What's that sound bouncing off of? Is it going to hit that trahedral or is it going to hit that toolbox that's sitting over here, right?
I feel a little bit of radioactive heat coming from this corner. I want to give Stuart a chance to chime in here.
Oh,
In-house calibrations.
well, and obviously, I think I agree. If they can do it, you should try. I think that the skills required to scan and calibrate are a lot different than full-blown diagnostic technician. Let's be real about what that is. We spent a considerable amount of time building tools, and again, we'll walk through this. What's the work that needs to be done? How do we help that technician through each step, and then how do we also take it, way past what the OEM has even thought about? And I'll share a little bit about what that means. Like when you're placing a target, and what's important. Obviously, it's level floor, right? So to accommodate an unlevel floor, what's that really mean in this space? It means everything. The alignment pre-check portion, checking that before moving forward with any calibration, it's essential. It's called common sense repair. And it's stuff that, we think about and want to put in our tools. But again, back to place and targets. When you look at getting it in the right spot and pitch, roll, yaws, we can talk about this all day long, and nerd out on that. But the reality is we want to get it into that OEM spec. We also don't want people to move forward unless it's correct. And so those are some of the safeguards that, when you look at what the aftermarket's trying to do, we care about the success of the technician. We care about the repair being finalized correctly. It's more than pushing a button, right? That workflow is everything. And then giving them tools, giving them, the information that they need to be successful each and every time, 100% of the time, So I think that's important. I think that, as we continue to evolve this thing, we just have to do a better job with this education piece. Make sure people are trained properly, know what to look for, have the right tools in their hands, resources. Let's look at the resources that are available just around this table today. Like we need to band together and just level this whole industry up. And I think we can. It's been great getting to know you, James, sitting at the ball game last night. Just being able to share everything together, it's amazing the amount of knowledge and the, if we do that as an industry, that's nothing but go straight out.
It was funny at the game last night. I was listening to you guys nerd out on and I just thought of the Far Side cartoon for some reason. There was a cartoon you did about like lab humor, that no one else gets but them, and you guys kind of that kind of thing.
You know, we all approach it a little different, but we're here because we care.
Yeah.
No matter how we do it, we all want safe customers on the road to make sure our neighbors don't die, or little Jimmy that rode his bike in front of the car is safe. You know, that's why we're all here, because we care, because we want to elevate. We want people to not be doing these in parking lots, and then put that on their social media, which just amazes me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we all want to get through this.
You know, it's funny. None of you guys mentioned the dealer. Now, I've heard some horror stories out there. It feels like the auto body industry is light years ahead of dealerships. You know, I've had it where, you know, they by default think that the dealer knows what they're doing, and in fact they don't. They don't even know the difference between a scan and a recalibration. And one guy told me that he went to the dealer and they had calibration equipment in boxes still. It wasn't even unpacked. So I think maybe you guys chime in here. I think the body shop industry has given up on sending it to a dealer because they're just as clueless as anybody else.
Well, look at where the incentive structure sits.
Mhm.
When you're looking at a body shop, are they incentivized to have the highest level of training among their technicians? They get certifications. You know, they can advertise that. They get preferential treatment from insurers when they have those specific certifications, have a higher level of education. Do you think that a dealership has a higher percentage of sales off their lot if the guy that details the cars can or can't properly calibrate the vehicles that show up? 9 times out of 10, I just assume that some kid gets handed a tablet and says, "Here, go drive this for 30 minutes."
I'll tell you a good story. So we have a regional manager for a manufacturer calls us, and he said, "Hey, can you guys help us on one?" So we go to one of their dealerships in a different city, and we're going to calibrate this thing. And we said, "Well, the windshield isn't in right." And they said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, you can't even see the vent. So we know that it's off center. That looks like aftermarket." It is. Okay, put factory glass and it'll come back. So they put in factory glass. We go back. We said, "It's still offset." Well, it just won't calibrate. Need you guys to look at it. Great. So we go into their shop, and then we said, "Okay, where do you do these at?" We'll sit right here. Yeah, that won't work. We went to 4 spots before we got to a spot that we would be okay doing a calibration in. Doesn't go through. We have the regional managers in the car with us, and we said, "Yeah, it's not going to go through. This camera just isn't sitting in here right." So he pushes it up, and he goes, "There, it just went through." Wow! But when you let go, it's going to drop back down and not work. And he's like, "No, it's good, perfect." We were just helping. We're not attached to this at all. You know, it's like, "Hey, we'll try to help you out here." And yeah, we get a call half an hour later. Yeah, the light came back on. Yeah, it was going to come back on. You know, that's the dealership. That's supposed to be the best that there is. Dealerships aren't made with a level space with nothing around, because what are they going to do? They're going to put a lift in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in ADAS man, we don't fix transmissions. We don't replace motors. We're very specialized in what we do. We want to be experts at what we do. And get so tired of hearing from insurance companies, "Well, I called the dealer down the street and they'll do all 5 calibrations for, an hour's worth of time." Who'd you talk to? "Well, I just called in and that's what they told me." Well, yeah, Jenny's been there 2 weeks. Jenny has no clue what's going on here. So now the car's going to go in the back and they're going to say, "Yeah, we just need you, just scan this thing and make sure that everything's okay."
The perception of dealerships is an interesting thing to me as a consumer, as a professional, and as somebody who cares about the industry and making it better, and somebody who came from an OE who doesn't have dealerships, who does direct sale. Truthfully, and I don't think a lot of consumers truly understand that the big sign out there that says Ford or Chevy or whatever the case is not a representative of the big folks in Detroit. They're a franchise, right? They've purchased the right to sell that product for that provider.
And as a consumer, you think you're taking it back to the dealer and they're a representative of the manufacturer. That's all they are, is a representative of the manufacturer, but they're not the manufacturer. Did you do the due diligence of that dealership? Did you walk in there and see how they're calibrating cars? Did you validate that what they're doing, all of the procedures that you're assuming that they're doing based on your OE certification? No. The answer is no. So, but they're going to take the liability from me. No, they might stand next to you in court, but guess what? When the check gets written, it's going to be from both of you. It's not going to be just from one of you.
Yeah, I think it's a great analogy. They are a repair shop that has the ability to do warranty repair.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that is either going to be a good experience or a bad experience. Just because there's warranty on vehicles doesn't mean that the vehicle even will be fixed, right? So I've had that experience. I'm sure others have too. I think, just to be fair, and I'll play devil's advocate just a little bit, if you're focused on warranty repair and just trying to get maintenance back into your shop, so that's what dealers are. If you look at the maintenance that's been really removed from vehicles, when I started in this, there was still points out there. And I know that may seem like, oh my gosh, a long time ago, but I used to work on old farm trucks that had points and condensers. And can you imagine somebody using the dwell meter today? Probably very few people. I still have it in my toolbox, and and I could do it in my sleep. But that's not the skill set today. But in the dealership world, to be fair, if they have a collision center, they're probably more apt to ADAS calibration, but they're still focused probably on that brand that they represent. And so there's all these other brands, and then, we're the dealer. We have this factory tools. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, So, just to be fair on all of it, like their focus, I don't think is the same, right? If they do have a collision center in their dealer, maybe, but there may be gaps there too, right? So, I think I'd love to see them level up. I mean, that industry, the dealer industry, needs to level up themselves.
Yep. Right. 100%. There's nobody that escapes the ability to be better, right? Including everybody sitting here at this table. I think you said it the best, Josh, in the sense of specialization and how the industry is, how rapidly it's moved that direction. You think we fixed cars exactly the same way, regardless of make and model, until the 90s. Effectively, right? You're a 111-year-old company, and you fix cars exactly the same way up until 30 years ago. So 80 years of your life of your business, it was the same. In the last 30 years, how has that changed? How fast has that changed? And how have we been able to keep up with it? Specialization is something that is, we don't talk enough about it. And I think it's critical to the success of consumer protection. That's that. And you talk rural markets. How do you find a guy in middle of Tennessee, nowhere, that can do all those things? It's really hard, right? Really hard.
Well, and when you look at the level of documentation body shops get from dealerships, what do you get?
A bill.
You get a line item and $1. Yeah, right? But, when we look at the collision repair process, one of the main struggles that body shops have is making sure that they have and can get payment from insurers, right? And these insurers dictate a lot of times the quality of the repair based off of the documentation they require during the repair process. I've had horror stories about people needing to show adjusters little handfuls of grinds of metal to prove that they needed to buy more rivets, believe it or not. Now, if they're interested in that level of documentation for that, why have they not also demanded a higher level of documentation for the calibration process? If you can't tell me that you've properly measured plumb points, you can document that you place that target 5,000 millimeters from the center point of the car, or that you've made sure that you've aligned your trihedral target, like some of the stuff you see behind us here, with that front radar target, how do I know, if I was an insurer, that calibration was performed correctly? Is it because I just don't want to know? And the dealership is, they checked the box. They said they did it.
We tell people, I take it to the dealer. Tell you what, the next couple you send there, put that tire at 40, that one at 35, this one at 30, just chuck up when it comes back. Because that's step one.
Yeah.
They'd never come back and said, no, they were all perfect. It's always, yeah, you weren't wrong. Well, they didn't do the first step. And no offense against them. I mean, I get it. This is, to me, very specialized. I don't want Jimmy, who's washing cars, to be doing calibrations for us. I want it to be one guy that he lives it, he breathes it, he studies things. And to be real, we need the OEMs to step up. There's a couple great OEMs that have some job aids that really help us, right? GM has a good one, Ford has a good one. Where's the rest of them at? Give us a little more roadmap. Don't use things like might need done. Does it need done or not? I mean, we need help to help the insurance side because we don't have all the adjusters anymore.
There should never be
Yeah, a little bit of stuff and they didn't recognize patient. And you also putting out a great story right there.
like the standards. I think we talked about this last night.
Yeah.
It starts with standards and accountability. How do we get there? Like again, we should band together to talk about what should those standards be, and if it's important for one OEM for wheel alignment and not another, why aren't we questioning that to the point of what's going on? Right? We're all using like an identification type software to understand should you be doing or shouldn't you? But I'll get back to common sense repair. It's like the radars come from the same places, whether it's a GM or a Rivian or whatever. Camera manufacturers are the same way. Those specs come from them. All the target sizes come from them, and then they repurpose that and build their cars around that. So my point is, there isn't that much difference between systems. Yes, there are some, but if it's important for wheel alignment for one manufacturer, it should be important for all. And I'd love to hear everybody talk about that because that's, I think, the gap in all this is why is the service information so different between manufacturers?
I think I just want to kind of close the loop. What you said kind of struck a chord. Common sense, right? Is the dealership a solution for what is the calibration business and the needs of a proper calibration today? And looking at it, you look at lean manufacturing. What are the principles, core concepts of lean manufacturing? Six Sigma, right? And it's identifying a process and how do you better that process and really break it down right? What we're looking at is, being able to, and again, you said collaborate, get, a lot of people at the table and really kind of figure out from many different standpoints, how do we get to a certain solution? And we've got so many subsets and so many different companies with different types of variables or resources that are needed to service that customer and at the end of the day, make a profit, right? So when it comes down to a repair facility now taking a customer and dissecting what that needs to be done for a repair, something goes wrong, where does it go? Who's got the best skill set? Dealerships for years and years have been the go-to for the bill payers, right? Because it says Toyota, it says Ford. They are the specialist, they're the expert when it comes to that vehicle. Well, when that business model it has nothing to do with the services that is needed, then there's really not the expert, right? Will dealerships get into the calibration space? Absolutely. Are they getting there? Absolutely. Once they see revenues and source, or they're seeing their funds go down, how oil changes do we do? How many fires? How much maintenance? They're gonna eventually go to as the vehicle's gonna go. However, at the same time, how many collision shops fix only Toyotas? Okay, how many collision shops only fix Wards? All right. Where do you want to sit in this space as far as specialization? You look at individual calibration centers that have the resources necessary. At the end of the day, I want to point to it's not necessarily just about resources. It's about experience and it's about people. Okay, because you're not going to get a scan tool that's going to give you the answer 100% of the time, and it's only going to have its little plan. That scan tool looks at one particular part of the vehicle, all right? That vehicle is a $15,000 hit touched by 15 different people at a repair shop, and there was 4 people in the vehicle. It was going 75 miles an hour, and it got hit 3 ways. Okay, there's so much specialization that comes into play that you've got to be able to break the whole process down and then find out who is the expert in that area to be able to address those challenges right off the bat. And it's just amazing about our industry and how fast it's moving with the calibrations and the collision repair that everybody wants to sit back and say, well, that's the way we've always done it.
Yep.
Send us the deal. That's the way we've always done. Hey, sometimes that works great. There's some great dealerships that can handle it, but a lot of times that is not the go-to. You've got to look to say, all right, where's that specialization? Who has the best human capital with the best resources in the experience? We've done over 10,000 calibrations in 4 years in our facility, both internal and external. And I'll tell you, that is our biggest strength, is being able to have that experience and be able to troubleshoot things that we've seen and be able to document. You target up digital footprint. This is only going to get better. It's like case law. It's like precedent. All right. And then it's in the medical field. As these things, you get better and better the more you practice it. That's what's going to happen. But we're still going to have to deal with the influx of new technology and then degradation. Honestly. We haven't touched on that.
Correct. We watch the technology get better and better. Think about the very first park sensors, right? Annoying as all get out. Everybody hated those stupid things when you backed up to something and the alarms went off and all that. How do you shut them off, right? And here we are now to having a 360 parking view. And if you looked at the technology in that and how that is, there isn't a camera above your vehicle that is actually taking a picture of the surround of the car, right? All of that is stitched together. All that is technology, right? Yeah, that's what it sure looks like when you're looking at the screen.
There is. It's not we.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how we've seen the technology evolve, right? And so to your point, Josh, we have to stay in front of that as if we're going to be relevant in this industry, and it's up to us to keep doing this. And I think to really help everybody else raise the tide, so everybody raises too.
We're getting so close to cars driving themselves. So my wife has one of the new Mach-E's. When I was out of town when she got it. So I come home and she's like, "You got to try this out." And I'm not 25. Shocker. So we get in and she's like, "Okay, do this and this." Okay. So it's driving itself. I'm sitting here with my hands like this because I know what happens when a calibration is not done right, so I'm sitting here with my hands like this, and it's really slick. Yeah. People want this, so technology isn't going to stop. I mean, we're trying to morph ahead, and honey, if you're watching this, I love you. She's not the best driver. So this technology is great for people like that, but the other side of it scares the crap out of me because your video, that's going behind you, and you're only looking at the camera. And you're not turning and using common sense and looking to see if little Billy's could ride a scooter right behind you when you're backing up. Bad things can happen. So, technology and humans got to kind of sport together.
Well, to your comment about rising tide raises all ships, as everyone in here, we touch a lot of cars, we calibrate a lot of cars, and I think we have a responsibility to collectively increase the quality of the product that we put out. And what's going to inevitably happen is they're going to choose that higher quality product, over a line item and a dollar amount.
Yeah. Consumers are, over 20% of new car purchasers today are buying the car based on technology on the vehicle. Over 20%. An interesting comment about your Mach-E. I have a 23 F-150 with Blue Curacao. Same thing. I drove it from Dallas to Colorado over 80% of the way. No hands on the steering wheel.
You're right.
You're
right. And
I think this industry is going to go from the standpoint where we're at right now. And I know you'll get into this, Jason, later on, but let's go stand where we're at. All right. In the state of Massachusetts, you cannot get an inspection sticker to legally drive your vehicle on the road if there is a sharp piece of rust coming off one of the body panels.
Wow.
Because sad about that state. Yeah, Russ is serious. Because at one point in time,
little Johnny was walking through a parking lot. He ripped his hand open, right?
Can you do that again?
I missed that one. But that is where we're at. All right, that is where we're at. Is you legally cannot drive a vehicle on the roads in the state of Massachusetts if you've got a jagged piece of shop metal on the car. Okay, where are we today with vehicles? And where are we going to be tomorrow? Where are we going to be 2 years from now? And you talk about the infrastructure, and this is just, that's the regulatory end of it. All right, you break it down to the real source, and it's that little Johnny and his family getting into a car accident. Now that vehicle is going to fix me probably. So that's what's just crazy about the different sectors and the motivations of the leaders and the drivers of each of where we're at, and how you're going to see this collaboration only increase tenfold.
Right, and to your point too, and James, you mentioned your wife and the consumer. Consumers this ADAS has been around for long enough now that they're leaning on this technology to help them drive. And they're also more educated. They're seeing the commercials during the Super Bowl for the latest, greatest car. And, it stopped. I was having an argument with my wife and it stopped before we hit the garbage truck kind of thing. So that, I think, is only going to increase potential for liability when the consumers are coming in your shop and they say, hey, are you going to fix this ADAS system right? How do you know about ADAS, All right, guys, so, ADAS, as we all know, has created a lot of stress and angst in the collision industry for obvious reasons. It's a very sophisticated technology. It's another thing we have to deal with in the repair. But there's a bright spot I think people are missing. And really, it's been a hallmark of the industry for over 100 years is innovation. The level of inventiveness and innovation and pioneering technology in such a short period of time to address this problem has been phenomenal. And I think people overlook that. And I wanted to ask you, Stuart, specifically in the technology angle. I mean, obviously there was a need and you came in and you filled it. But I mean, how did you assemble such amazing innovativeness and inventiveness and technology and just genius into, creating equipment that's not only practical for the collision repair to use, but also can be used by a lot of different people of different skill sets?
That's a great question. I think it's really the AUTEL way from the very beginning. It was always around the technician themselves. How do you help that technician through every step? What are the problems as they arise? Like, what can we do to make that, that job easier, more efficient, repeatable? Just, again, elevate the technician themselves. So and this goes back to the work that needs to be done. And it's not that difficult. And then ask really technicians, what do they want? What do they need? Obviously, there's a training issue in the whole industry, always has been. And as an ex-technician myself, factory trained, but there was always skill gaps, even at the dealer level, even at the, no matter what shop. So I think tools and the development of these tools, it's always around making that job easier and more efficient. So I don't think there's any secret sauce other than really caring about that process and really focusing on what's required.
And you guys, as users of the tools every day and this equipment, what are your thoughts about this? I mean, are you just blown away that how great this stuff is and easy to use, intuitive, and that kind of thing?
I would tell you it's been interesting to watch the evolution, and I think you touched on that in the start of your statement there, Jason. We think back about we've been calibrating cars 2014 model years when they finally really started kind of hitting, and we think about the 800 or the 600, some of the original AUTEL tools that were required. And our founder, Jerry Cathcart, will tell you, man, I can take a 600 and set it up faster than the 900, right? Because that's what he was trained on. That's what he learned on. And now we advance into the precision that comes with the 900 and the capability of that tool and what it has allowed us to do from technician level skill set, to your point, in making it easier. I had a mentor once who used the philosophy of, you have to take the approach to always make it so simple that a human will do it. And I think that to your point, Stu, that's really what AUTEL's focus has been, is how do we continually progress the tool so it becomes easier for the user to succeed and be successful. And I think we've seen that. You think about equipment in a body shop. We go back in the body shop for a long time, right? You buy a welder and you don't look at that welder again for 20 years. How soon did you look at your new calibration equipment? It was 2 years before. And how the life cycle of that has evolved and how rapidly that's evolved. And so I think that's what's really cool and innovative, to kind of tie back to what you started. It's impressive to see how fast it has come from strings and plumb bobs exclusively and tape marks on the floor to much more sophistication and technology built into the frame.
Guys, any thoughts on the equipment today and what we're dealing with?
We had a good conversation. So I do it a little different than most at the table, which is great. I love that it's repeatable, that a human can't fail at that. We do need something like that because humans are lazy, right? We want the easy button. As a technician for a long time, I was always looking for, how am I going to make more money? What can I do that is going to get me to that end goal? A tool like this it can beat that. It can make sure that it's done correctly.
What I love about the AUTEL equipment is that we always are looking for what the technician needs next, right? So when we first came out with our ADAS equipment, yes, it was a solution for ADAS target placement, repeatable, easier to use. It was great. We then saw, as cars got older with ADAS, the need for alignment. So we developed alignment pre-check, an alignment frame specifically for performing alignments tied into the ADAS calibrations. Now we're going even further with physical angle validations and other equipment to check deeper onto the car, underlying issues that might cause those calibrations to fail. So we are working on not just giving the technician a easy to use target placement machine, it's an all-in-one guided diagnostic machine to help them get through fixing that car.
I'd like to expand on something that you brought up earlier. We talk about vehicles on the road now that have an increased level of ADAS than they had before. We mentioned 2014, and as you progress through time, there's more and more systems on cars. And I think the complexity of how these systems talk to each other is also increasing.
Yeah.
We're looking at new calibrations coming out every year for new systems, and the complexity of how these systems integrate with each other. And eventually the vehicles themselves will talk to each other on the road.
The Jetsons, baby, we're getting close.
But where I'm going with this is, we were talking specifically about AUTEL's place in that calibration and how useful their tool has been for a lot of ADAS technicians. And I'll be the first person to point out that their tool is vastly superior than some of the static target tools that are purchasable through the OE. Like if we look at the early Honda windshield camera target, I think in my head about this drooping scaffold that you have to put in front of the car. Or I think about the parking sensor azimuth check tool, which is a milled C-channel piece of metal with this weird little button on it. Good luck ordering one. And when it...
Or PVC pipe.
Or PVC.
Or PVC.
But those special.
When it comes to repeatability and ease of use from a technician's perspective, I mean, if the end goal is to calibrate that car as close to the OE documentation warrants, that calibration be performed, you have to have the tool. And if it's on back order, you have to go through a company like AUTEL to make sure that you can, one, get the part, and two, can use that tool. And, there's several examples I can point out where, from personal experience, I've had a significantly easier time documenting and using a tool made by AUTEL than what the OE manufacturer has provided, that one, I couldn't get for 8 months. And when I did get it, I was like, really? this is it. This is what their solution was. And it was more expensive.
I think when it comes into equipment, coming into the calibration space, the culture that's really the calibration demand that have a culture and type of technician is outstanding. It's refreshing for the industry and a whole, right? It's like, how do you make collision repair sexy again, right? Where we were able to lean into the calibration industry and say, this is something cool. This is awesome. This is something that affects collision repair all the way from day one. And you see at the beginning, you see the middle, but you see at the end. And then what type of equipment is out there, to support, the consistent pivoting and evolution of collision repair through, the calibration space. When we were very early on looking at different types of equipment that was out there, it was very obviously early on, and there was only 3 or 4 major players. But when, as an owner, anytime you're purchasing a piece of equipment, there's going to be an established ROI based on time frame. All right, and in order to reach that ROI, you've got to have necessary people to run the equipment, but then you've got to have options of what happens when that equipment goes down, and looking at service. And that's where we leaned in. We were able to effectively make the decision that AUTEL, one, was the best player in the space, not only because of the wide use of the equipment, the capabilities of, but then the backup and service and training, because it is something new. It is something consistently changing. So that's where we kind of leaned in, was the service aspect. And, when something does go wrong, who can we easily reach out to? And the people that we have in our calibration space, it's an awesome culture. When something goes wrong, they're not picking up a landline that can dialing on the phone. They're texting somebody, and they're texting a technician to find out what's going on. And not only that, bringing it all the way home, round circle, is that technician is now texting somebody else. They may be texting a group chain of calibration technicians across the country, whether they work at TAG, whether they work out in California. And that's, what's great. It's been a collaborative effort in the collision repair space through the necessity of calibrations.
Let's talk about that calibration technician. And I understand there's a difference between a calibration technician who is fluent in calibrations and a diagnostics technician who can do reprogramming, things like that. But you guys made me think of something. I'm going to date myself. I had the $6 million man doll back in the day, Lee Majors, right? And he had the little glass eye you could look through, the magnified kind of a binoculars, and had a little computer chip in the back, right? So when you think about that, if you were to build the perfect ADAS technician, calibration technician, diagnostics technician, what would he look like? What would his brain feed off of? What is he? I guess physical probably doesn't matter so much, but what is the makeup of a perfect electronics troubleshooter type guy?
I like a gamer. I like a guy that he's into video games. He can build computers. He just understands it at a different level than I did when I first started this. I am not the most technical, or was not the most technical guy. 11 years ago, I sent my first email. So
yeah,
true story. But again, I'm an information junkie, so I'm going to dive in and I'm going to learn as much as I can. And you want people that are hungry for knowledge, because we're ever changing every day. It just leaps and bounds sometimes. Again, we're getting to the Jetsons. So you got to have somebody that is open-minded, willing to get education as much as possible. And not just take the class while you're working on something and you're hitting the button, actually taking the classes and retaining it. Yeah.
He has to be a problem solver. I mean, that's the hardest thing. We said it. You heard me say it earlier about collision being very visual, and we're inherent upon looking at a dent. I see a dent, I fix a dent. That's collision repair summed up, right? And ADAS and diagnostics, there's not a visual aid to tell you there's something wrong there. So you have to have an inherent ability to solve a problem and be willing to keep hunting to find that problem, to identify it, because it's a needle in a haystack many times.
The behaviors necessary to be an ideal calibration technician really come down and this is something that we, kind of dove right into, is looking at the genetic makeup and the behaviors and characteristics of the perfect technician. What's the first thing you do in a job application? Was get their name and information, have them fill out a behavioral assessment. Where do they fall? And it is just a tremendous continuous pursuit of curiosity and problem solving. And just, they are the perfect technicians to be able to troubleshoot and be curious of why is this happening. I've seen this 13 times over, but this time, this one thing is actually just a leaper. And why? And when it comes to, operating a whole business, there's pros and cons to that. But that's with that certain levels, you need to have a very clear understanding of where that person starts and where their brain, how it works, and to build the tools and resources around them, and then be able to get to a point where, kind of like a relay race, they pass the baton to the next person.
I like to look at it from a calibration tech. It's as simple as read, follow, execute. A diagnostic technician would be somebody that is passionate about how does that system work, how understanding all the ins and outs of the wiring diagram, how the communication lines work with each other, how the systems talk, how that's different, right? Read, follow, execute, fairly easy. The other is a lifelong commitment to this industry and leveling yourself up. Like, understand how to do a bolt drop. Do you know how many technicians, when you ask them that, can't accurately do better? And I think it's the passion. Like, you really want to know how that system works is key.
When we think about the calibration tech versus your diagnostic tech, if I'm hiring for a position at one of my calibration stores, I don't distinguish a lot of differentiation between those two roles. For me, that the overlap of that Venn diagram is substantial.
Interesting.
I think we have to think about entry level versus an accomplished, right? I mean, there's always going to be this element of ABC techs, right? You have to, we're a trades industry, so there's an apprentice element that has to be considered, right? It's how you get people. Everybody entry artist on one exactly. You're not an expert on it.
Yeah, but the trades, back to what we were saying, attention to detail. Josh, you mentioned it. Person who does something 15 times and then that one time is different. Why did that have us different? Yeah, did you delve into how the components operate, how that sensor operates, how it operates with the entire system? Did you look into the wiring diagrams? Did you follow all these wires? Did you see how everything commingles with the other sensors? Did you read the service information? Did you go through all the steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 instead of skipping to the end and trying to assume the repair? That's what I think is the difference between a diagnostic technician.
Old school flow charts replaced with no good part doesn't even
No, that's
right.
Cars say shot me art to cars.
I was back to train. That's what it always said.
You're gonna test with known good part.
As we're talking about this, I can think of my guy Dan back at home base, and he is the diagnostic guy because we get, he does all of our technology stuff too. When something doesn't work, it's broke. He's going to bring it back, open it up, and try to figure out why it broke. And it doesn't matter. We already bought a new one. We're throwing that one away. But he has to know that answer or it's going to fry him. I mean, it's going to screw him up for a couple days, which is why we love him, because he's just that detail, very detailed, and it's pretty cool when you see those guys.
I think these are all ideal solutions, but we've got a necessary, certain level of responsibility to the industry, right? And so we're talking about stories that we know that we're comfortable with ideal. What is an ideal technician, and how do you hire, and how do you go to the play? The truth of the matter is there is no such thing as ideal, right? Because not every shop, no every calibration facility is going to pick that person off the street. Just like there is no collision facility that's going to find that perfect A-tech, and they're going to be a culture fit right off the bat, and they're going to bang out 250% productivity. Not going to happen. All right, so realistically, in today's industry, one of the solutions that come into play is through the use of the tool and training. We found is a rotational program. apprenticeship. You talk about hitting schools, you're hitting schools with co-ops. Before co-ops, you having that tech school tour your facility, calibration facility, collision repair facility, create that relationship, and then bringing people in from the school or people from outside the industry. I mean, if we're going to survive, you talk about the technician tsunami, if we're going to survive, you need to bring people outside the industry. And how do you bring in these gamers, these introverts from outside the industry and put them through a rotational program? Because you're going to find out where they're going to, what's their passion, right? And that's the only merits. It's not with the old way of command and control, do as I say, not as I do, or like, you got to take this person, you got to put them into play, try this, try this, try this. Where are you gonna prosper the best? And that's what we found is we've had super great success on an active rotational program between calibration facility, different areas of the calibration facility. Mind you, you got mobile units, you got in-house, you got dispatching schedule, you got somebody sitting on a computer 24/7. Yeah, finding what's out there. But then even then breaking them up to whether it be, we'll switch them over to be the body shop side too. And we've had from this rotational program, we'll speak a little bit about some of the offerings that iCar is coming out with to assist that. But off the rotational program, we have seen people go into a diagnostic tech, to a front office writer, to a body tech, into paint, just to find out where their passion is. What's been great about that is they've had 3 to 6 month rotations in a business model that is both collision and ADAS, and they've got a further understanding of the industry over that. And they've had access and exploration tool.
Go ahead.
That locks them in versus some of the old school collision center approaches where you just come out of trade school and you get stuck with the old crotchety, cranky, angry old body tech in the back corner, right? If you can survive hanging out with him for a week, you'll be in the industry for the rest of your life. But,
I like your approach because you're not shoving a square peg round bolt.
Yeah.
You're putting them through it a little bit and then seeing what's best for you and them.
So someone told me recently the biggest problem in the collision industry right now is collision repairers don't know when they should be doing calibration, and then they don't know what kind of calibration they should be doing. True or false?
True. Barely true. Yeah. There's no great system out there right now that's 100%. We were talking about one company that's kind of telling everybody you have to use this scrubbing system. So I got up and asked the question at CIC, and I said, well, who's liable if the calibration's missed? If that company's saying you have to do this, you have to use this company, and that's what we're going to pay for. But now who's liable? I feel they should have some skin in the game because they're saying you have to use this. And I'm sure the people at the top don't mean it the way that it's happening at the bottom. But at the bottom, they're saying, that's all we're going to pay for is what's on here. Well, no, I'm giving you documentation that there's 2 calibrations missed. Nope, that's all we're paying for. Or if you do the other way and you say, it doesn't need these 2 calibrations, well, it's going to affect your score if you don't do those 2 calibrations. So they're throwing away money over here and not paying over here. So I don't know. I think it's a bit of a slippery slope.
Yeah, that's been a constant problem in the industry, right? Getting paid properly for a proper repair, whether it's fixing a dent or doing a calibration or a scan. It's just maybe this kind of we talk about now. This maybe I'm gonna throw a grenade in the room here, run out here, but this is obviously the insurers. I think it was we were in a fantasy world for a while and we were able to kind of bill what we wanted for calibrations and scanning, and now insurers are trying to get their arms around these costs, and it's creating some more stress in the industry. Maybe we talk about that, guys. Should there be a standard fee or cost for a scan, for a calibration, for the whole kit and caboodle, whatever. Obviously, Michael Girizzo, inventor, spent $250,000 on his calibration facility. Does he need to charge? Should he be charging more than the regular guy? Or is it just based on, just documentation and of your time spent and the investment and whatnot?
I feel like collision, it's custom. Every vehicle's going to be different. The situation's going to be different. It should be based on the work that needs to fix the vehicle. I think the scrubbers do a really good job of trying to identify that. The intent is there. It's the execution that's poor, but that's not all their fault either. I think it starts with no OE standardization across the board. OEs don't agree on the same processes. That's a problem. And so it's normal where there is a gap here that people are trying to fill. It's just a very, very hard thing to fill.
It's the Grand Canyon.
Yeah. And so the intent's right. And from an insurance perspective, not to, always lean their way, there's times where they've been overcharged and in a really bad way. And that's bad business. So the bad actors, they need to go away, right? So there should be standardization, in my opinion, but I think it starts with what should be done from the OEM level, and then that would make this whole process so much easier. So those gaps today is just like us, we're trying to build tools to help everybody. These ADAS identification or scrubbers, whatever you want to call them, they're trying to do the same thing. It's a painful thing in the shop. It takes a lot of time. James, those guys, they're doing it all OEM 100%. And it's very expensive. So there's expense, there's time. I mean, again, the intent for all these companies, they're trying to help. We're trying to level up. But we gotta figure out how do we help each other, We have to figure it out.
I think a lot of entities have attempted to take shots in the dark at standardizing monetization of calibration process. I remember freaking out because CCC started to populate time, 30 minutes of some random labor rate. And who knows where they got that number from. There was no labor study done. To my knowledge, there still isn't. You can't compare a random setup or a Ford surround view mat to the automatic video placement of new Toyotas. Like you said, the standardization needs to be there first prior to anyone attempting to set standardized pricing. That being said, when it comes to standardizing the pricing, the incentive structure around it is all wrong. When I get calls from my technicians because they're fighting with an insurance adjuster who claims that they've called Toyota and the dealership will do the same calibration for $100 or whatever. But it's a different product. And I get back to what I said before about the difference between checking a box and making sure that we protect ourselves and the occupants of that vehicle from the liability of these safety systems. And the manufacturers, unfortunately, will have to come to terms with the fact that they have categorized these, whether they know it or not, as safety systems the moment they put them in charge of anything power-related. Brakes, engine, steering. Sorry, it's a safety system now. It is no longer a driver's convenience. A system like pedestrian detection, that's not a convenience. You don't get to just conveniently not drive people over as they're walking across the street.
That video you have, by the way.
Yes, it's an incredibly calm video.
Incredible video, and we should show that. You guys need to show that.
Well,
Sure.
I'll share it with the group,
Yeah,
and we can include that too. I think it's been shared enough that I think we're beyond, any sort of worries there. But the incentive structure, like I said, is just not set up to favor the quality of the calibration currently. And I think we have a responsibility to make sure that we document this process properly, we allocate our time properly, and we don't abuse the system and become some of the bad actors that Stuart had mentioned earlier. I think it's an incredibly important process. And, whether we like it or not, these vehicles that we calibrate are going to end up in a courtroom 6 months after they're repaired. At some point, it's going to happen. Whether it has happened or not and settled out of court is up to debate. We had that conversation earlier. But when we compare our calibration with the service procedure, which is currently what all we have to go off of right now is what the manufacturers mandate the calibration should look like. A lawyer should be able to go line item by line item. Oh, you followed all these steps. Here's all the steps that were called out. It was not the calibration that was the fault of that collision or that fatality or whatever. And that's the whole point. We're supposed to help protect these people from, not from the repair, but from the systems that aren't necessarily smart enough to tell whether or not they're functioning properly. It's our job to tell if they're functioning properly.
Well, let's be real. We want these done right again so that people can drive down the road and text while they're driving and everybody else is going to be safe.
Yeah. I think the misconception is when you talk about standardization and how quickly insurance companies and providers such as CCC have a goal of standardization when it comes around calibrations. It's the wild, wild west. Pricing, here, there, everywhere. Well, yes, there is going to be standardization. There's a goal to move towards standardization, but it's no different than how long have we been practicing medicine on the human body? Has the human body really changed over real years? Okay, there are certain aspects that standardization applies, but there's so many different aspects due to specialization in the advancement in technology and the factors that go into what makes up the human body, now what makes up the vehicle, that standardization does not apply. And when you talk about nuts and bolts of these vehicles and the technology, well, yeah, standardization. I want standardization. I want standardization profitability. Our technicians want standardization that calibration will go the same way every single time. It's not going to happen. There is a very large element that when you have so many variable costs and floating variables, okay, the cost is never going to be the same. We analyze, job costing per calibration. The cost is never the same, depending on how granular you get based on the technology and the human capital required in that vehicle. Dynamic. You talk about doing a dynamic calibration. Okay. How many stop plates did that vehicle go through? Okay. Was it on a highway? What did it hit upon? Like,
How'd that work on the snow?
100%. So to attach a real cost to that, because hey, if you say I want to maintain X profitability, that's my standard. All right. There's no way to get there.
No, good.
Absolutely not. However, we got to be mindful and appreciate that all our partners, software providers, insurance companies, all right, as far as equipment companies, everybody's got a goal. Okay, working together and achieve that goal, we can focus on standardization, but there is going to be a huge piece of this that is beyond anybody's control.
Always have to market, right? I mean, at the end of the day, there are opportunities to sell in their vehicle to somebody. And so that word proprietary is always going to be a factor in getting standardization to the table to all of them to sit down. We're seeing a lot of it though, right? I mean, we're seeing that kind of get chinked and making progress where manufacturers are collaborating and using drive systems and using different cross-function technology. So I think we're getting closer to being able to be there. I think that notion in those companies' minds that they have a secret sauce still exists more than they might realize that they don't. At the end of the day, when you look at the technology in its simplest form, whether it's a Toyota, a Ford, a Rivian, a Lucid, a Tesla, conceptually it's all the same, right? And that's your standard point, I think, right, Stu, is that it's a radar. The function of the radar is the same regardless of the car that it's bolted to. Why does one engineer say alignment doesn't matter and the other one does? There isn't logic to that. There is no common sense to that line of thinking. The OE justifies that by thinking there's a proprietal concept to that thought process. It's kind of weird.
And their way's always going to be better than the other guy.
Yeah.
That's right.
They did it dumber.
Should we allow some manufacturers to hold a, what's the word? To capitalize on a higher level of safety than others. So the way that I said, like, if someone had a patent on hazards, would you allow that manufacturer to produce vehicles with hazards, and no one else is allowed to have hazards on their cars, right?
What's in there?
But that but we're asking them, we're telling them that they're allowed to do that, right? Super Cruise they're allowed to have that Super Cruise, but when we're allowing them to have a monopoly on life, I think we're again pursuing the wrong direction of incentives. And some of these manufacturers, because they've gone down the road of proprietary, and we've let them have proprietary, monopolies on safety systems, then we've effectively told them that, well, if you're rich enough and you can put your kids in an Audi, they're not going to die in the next accident. But if they're in a Nissan, they might. And that's just an example. Nothing against Nissan or Audi, but
And think that you start looking at this technology and the sense of proprietary, or that definition, the manufacturers they're a little uninformed when it comes to the big world, and you get out into the broader spaces of autonomy and the companies out there that are creating the capability of autonomy. They don't care what car that's going on. It's technology. It's going on to a moving vehicle, right? The technology is not proprietary at that point. And that autonomous capability is well beyond anything a manufacturer has today. I watched a system last year that from a satellite can pinpoint a location within 3 millimeters on a vehicle. That dot on that vehicle from a satellite. That's how finite the GPS capability was, within 3 millimeters.
as long as I don't get stuck in a roundabout and I automated car on the way to the airport now.
Did that really happen?
Not to me.
Oh, okay.
Video.
Wow.
Sure.
So let's talk about wheel alignment and calibrations, which go together like peanut butter and jelly today. So it's logical, right? The car needs to be going straight down the road for everything to see properly and sense properly. I think collision repairers don't understand this concept, and some might not have an alignment rack, so what do? But, calibrations aside, they need to align the vehicle first, right? Talk about that.
Yeah, I think there's many challenges here. What typically tends to come up is, was it out of alignment before the event? And we can argue that till we're blue in the face. Obviously, tread on tires is a great indicator. But that also could mean you had low inflation on tires. There's so many variables here. And I guess at the end of the day, it's not what was the cause. It's if it needs corrected, there should be no doubt. And then who pays for that? I guess that goes back to policies. Everybody needs to be reading their insurance policies. We all talked about this earlier. I don't think I read my policy. I just switched insurance carriers, probably, and I didn't read. But I did look how much it was costing me. And I think that's what the driver factor is, okay? So wheel alignment is so crucial. And then we'll go back to common sense repair. If the vehicle is doglaying down the road and it's looking over here, it's not looking straight down the road. It doesn't matter how that system's made. Yes, there's a field of view for every sensor, whether it's radar or camera, but center point is center point, and there is an effect to that. It's left, right, it could be distance, it could be a ton of things. So it's very important. It's a misstep, and I feel like when we speak to a lot of collision centers, a lot of them are subletting that out anyway. It's mechanical. I know there's a big percentage of collision centers that just don't get into the mechanical. If it's wheel bearings, if it's struts, or whatever it may be, let's go on somewhere else. So I think that potentially is a problem, right? So if you're a mechanical shop doing work for collision, it's not just the everyday paying customer anymore, right? There's a lot to this, right? So think of the estimate that's required, the work that's required. Anyway, alignment's the first step, and a lot of this, right?
If they miss the alignment and they do the calibration and the car's doglegging down the street, have they just wasted their time, or is it better than nothing?
It's not good.
Yeah.
Turn it off.
Yeah.
Turn that safety system off. Like, I've rented a ton of cars. I'm telling you, brand new vehicles coming off the lots. I don't know if it's from being strapped down to the trucks in the delivery process or what it is. There's these systems, these cars drive weird. Like, when there's wheel alignment that's out, they don't drive right. There's just no doubt about it.
Take it back to earlier. Josh has been talking a lot today about how we cross over medical field versus collision repair or automotive. Mm-hmm. If you go to the doctor because you have a sore elbow or a knee, regardless of what you go into your primary care physician for, what's the first thing that they do?
You have to fill out that form.
Okay, you get back into easier. Then do.
Literally the first step. You get into the exam room with that.
They forget. Yeah, right. They're much better at that than we are. That's for sure.
Yeah.
They check your blood pressure, right? They check your oxygen. It doesn't matter what you go in to see the doctor for. That's the first step. It's the basis of the things that anything that's tied electronically to that vehicle in ADAS. The alignment is it's the blood pressure of that system.
But again, there's really only a couple manufacturers that are really calling it out in their procedure.
Yeah, and some don't.
So manufacturers, if you're watching, put it in there. Help us out. I mean, we want to do it. We want to fix cars right. But sometimes we need that roadmap so the bill payer on the other end says, okay, I'm good with that. We've talked a lot about common sense. Common sense is gone. I mean, it's not there anymore, you know? And if it's not written down, the other side is just, well, it's not there. You don't have to do this.
Yeah.
It's just, it gets very frustrated. We need some help with procedures and how important some of this stuff is. And until we can get some of these OEMs to jump in and give us some of that, I think we're still going to have to struggle.
Yeah, and I think they do actually pays for that. It's not monetary. It's like if you have that $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 vehicle and my car doesn't drive, if that car drives bad, I may not buy your brand anymore. That's right. I wouldn't think you would understand that, and like you'd want to make sure that that's corrected, like to keep people loyal to brands. I mean, I want my vehicle to drive right, and I'll switch in a heartbeat. I used to be loyal to a few brands when I was younger. I'm not loyal anymore because I've been disappointed a lot, and I think I'm not the only one. I think most people get disappointed in brands and they'll switch. There's plenty of options, plenty of choices. Yeah, you know.
Josh, you guys do a lot of calibrations. Are you doing alignments too?
Yes. So we will sublet alignments out to our mechanical division. And then if necessary, talk about the evolution of just two-wheel alignment. You still see it. Yeah, otherwise you can still see it. Yeah, which blows my mind. But set the toe, let it go. It doesn't apply. Right. All right. So the vehicle doesn't know. Calculated. Is that calibrated? Is that in? The vehicle does not know that, right? So to your point, are we treating, the problem we're treating sentence? When it comes down to the alignment, that will give you some really good information. But I do believe that it is one of the aspects of calibrations that it's got to be taken into consideration. It's got to be a starting point, because at the end of the day, without that being correct, you have the potential triggering other ADAS faults.
Do you feel that you make it just triggered in my mind as you're describing that $59 alignment that we see all the time? That's we provide alignments. Every one of our calibration centers has an alignment capability, and I offer it to every customer. And their first question back to me isn't, how do I do an alignment? It's, how much do you charge where you're lined up because I can take it over here and get it for $50. They don't, that now we've gotten to the root of the problem. They're not comprehending as the repairer why that alignment is so critical in the process of repairing that car. So therefore they can't convey that to the bill payer. And the bill payer is looking for the proof.
You could have a technician under the front end of that vehicle that is making adjustments to that vehicle and has no idea that it was a $15,000 loss. What was replaced?
Yes.
With what type of parts?
That's a great point.
And, you know, so you talk about how many things come into play. The point of any really business model is to effectively eliminate as many variables you can control out of that process. And the more that you introduce more into that, to your point, that is a fantastic business model where you can eliminate that. But that is just one variable that nobody really thinks about. Like, oh yeah, we get alignment, realign every time we get a calibration. What else is really going?
Well, and you get that aligned, you got that little pie chart, right? It's green in the middle, red on the sides. Well, we can't be all the way over here in the green. We have to try and have it be right in the middle because, again, that's going to affect our calibration in the future. If you're a little over to the right, you got some weight in it because you didn't do it right. You didn't take the weight out, or you got a bigger boy sitting on the right side after the calibration. You're going to start to cause some issues. And that's, this whole topic, I'll kind of give AUTEL some props because your machine kind of does that, checks that before you do it. And again, we got to make sure that we're hitting dead center here. Steering angle sensors are reset. The car knows where true mark that is. Yeah.
Speaking to a lot of shops, that's probably one of the biggest misses. Alignment shops and jump, not even collision, just normal alignment shops, not performing the basic steering angle relearns, and it's a major.
It's crazy, right? It's a major crazy, but and not educating their consumer. I mean, you sell them a set of tires. How expensive are tires now? You can buy a set of tires for a car for under $2,000 almost, and you're not selling them an alignment. In the process, you're not educating that consumer on what the value of that alignment is. Well, now you're telling me if I put an alignment on it, and I'm the calibration dude who's walked in and tried to scare the bejesus out of them to say, well, if you align the car now, you got to calibrate the car. Their whole thoughts are, how do I tell that customer I got to charge them $1,500? I already just sold them $2,000 worth of tires. Now I have to sell them a $200 alignment and a $1,500 calibration.
Sucks. Never thought of this, but step one of an alignment's air tires up properly, right?
Yep. Shake it down.
Well, I think we're going to have to check that a little bit and maybe check out some of these $50 alignment places. Because I'm going to guarantee you they're probably missing step one.
Tone, go.
Yeah.
Let's bring up OEM versus aftermarket. And I'm just going to go under the table right now. I think repairers are confused out there. They just want one tool that does it all, right? I mean, go back to the F-150, that aluminum, and they had to get a different welder now, and they've got 10,000 different welders because they're on 10,000 different certifications. They just want one tool that does it all, but that's not reality, right? So, they hear stories, well, this aftermarket tool won't have access to this vehicle. If I'm a Honda certified shop, I got to use the Honda proof scan tool. Maybe we start with you, Stuart. You're a logical person to talk about this with.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big can of worms, right? We're proud to be part of ETI, and not everybody knows who ETI is, but that's how we gain access, and we purchase and license data from all the OEMs. Without that, you can't legally do anything with an aftermarket scan tool. We get this information early. It does take time to develop software for all of our tools, and there's lots of security gateway issues now. They're not necessarily issues. It's more about ensuring that the vehicles can't be stolen. We do things the right way, and I applaud all that. I think that's an amazing thing that's going on. When it comes to communication, I think we do a very good job. Benny tests every vehicle. Whenever we have an update, Benny is out there and verifying that it works, right? So we're very confident with what we bring to the table, and for coverage, overall, it's amazing. So we're very quick to market. We released a whole slew of 2025 vehicles this past month. So there's not a lot we can't do, and we're super fast to the table. Is it an OEM scan? No. But do we do everything in our power to make it as good as possible? Absolutely. Matter of fact, we want to take extra steps to make it even better if we can. So, aftermarket versus OE, obviously it's made for that OEM. It's their IP. No OEMs make their own scan tool. They're asking somebody else to build their hardware. They own their IP. Right? We're do it all. No matter if it's Mercedes or Chrysler or Ford or whatever, we're gonna put everything that we can into a tool.
And Vinny, you mentioned, we were talking yesterday about your role, and you have a very, very important role as a field technician for AUTEL. Describe what you do.
So I take all of this software that we license, and once our engineers translate it into our tools software, I go into the field, find those vehicles, vet the procedures. If there's any static calibrations, let's say, obviously the procedures might not match the exact step-by-step, but at the end of the day, the procedure will be the procedure that we need. The target will be in that final location that we need it to be at. So I'll go through that procedure, make sure that when we do the setup, our target ends up in the same place that it would be as if I followed the OEM procedure with the string and the plumb out. So there's a electrical check, and then there's a physical check that I do for each calibration that we add to our tool.
So how many Vinny's does AUTEL have? How many of
For
them?
ADAS is just Vinny.
Oh,
So
okay.
when you say you go to the field and get the cars, you're from New York, right? We talking we boost these things?
He specializes in the yeah.
Yeah.
And Dodge. So we have a lot of shops, local, tri-state area, Connecticut, New Jersey, Long Island is where I'm from, that they have our equipment, they have other brands of equipment, they have OEM equipment, and they'll go in and they'll say, Vinny, the AUTEL is missing this. Vinny, we have this car that we're having trouble with. The OEM isn't really guiding us along the way. Is there anything the AUTEL has in their steps and procedures to kind of get us past this car? Even more basic, just access to 2025 newer vehicles as they come out. I go in there, scan it, check all the scans, all the diagnostic features, make sure we communicate to all the modules. There's a lot of comparative tests with our equipment and the OEM to make sure that we're doing the correct stuff, the same things. Yeah, it comes down to relationships with local shops that have our equipment and are in this fight with us.
Vinny and I were having a conversation last night, and I said, I don't envy you guys in your need and the challenges that you're faced with the OEs. And as we now continue to ramp the technology on these cars and the sophistication of the software that exists on them in a connected car, right? We hear that word, it's a buzzword, right? I drive a connected car. What does that truly mean? And that there's a lot of legacy manufacturers that have a element of connection, but they're not truly a connected car yet, right? You guys have some runway with those cars because they can't change them as quickly as a manufacturer that has a fully connected vehicle. Coming from Rivian, I owned a Rivian. My Rivian R1T never set foot in a Rivian service center ever. Never went back in physically to that location to be worked on. But the day that I got it to the day that I sold it, that vehicle was tremendously different in what its capability was. It didn't have egress when I got the car, so the seat didn't automatically slide back. When I got rid of it, it did. Nobody did anything to that other than connect to it and send a piece of software to that car to say to do that. Now you guys have to battle that, and how do you communicate with that module and have that communication and stay on top of that, right? Because it can come tomorrow, they can take it back.
All right.
If it's something to go well, they could turn features on.
I'll have to go test that car the next day all over again, right?
Yeah. And so that's the connection piece that I think that's going to perpetually just get harder and harder and more challenging. And we start seeing OEs protect these modules because, again, Well, because of my experience with Rivian, the first generation R1 product, 70 some modules on the vehicle, right? They came out with a redo of that in Gen 2, and that 70 module went down to 40 something. But they didn't change any capability in the vehicle. They just moved software where it was programmed to. So now have they stacked software on these modules that you guys have to get access to, but they don't want you to have access to these 3 things that are within that module, and you get locked out of that. And now you have to bridge over that. And what is that putting you guys at risk for, or us as a repairer at risk for, because it's not communicating completely with that module and the challenges that exist there. I'm telling you guys,
God bless you, because it's not an easy job, that's for sure.
Speaking of Rivian, we're going to talk about this major announcement you had a few months ago. I think it's relatively fresh. Your equipment company was approved by Rivian, when Rivian, obviously, we know, is a very forward-thinking, futuristic, intelligent car maker, and they chose you guys. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Rivian's a technology company. They are unique. They are forward-thinking. They're very stringent on their standards, like very picky. We're very proud of them to pick us, and we really had to meet tight standards. They were all about a few things, like they would never approve something that you couldn't validate the process with. Meaning, if you can't prove the work that you just performed, you'll never be approved in that space with them. So that's polar opposite of some other, OEMs, or they may not take the same approach. So validation's key. Really, the optical systems for them, that's the only choice. There was this manual process of having technician errors that could happen, that they were not interested in that. Again, they want to use technology to calibrate technology. And so very cool experience. Benny, love to hear
They don't. What Stuart's getting at is they don't have a string and plumb bob method. They have all camera-based technology, calibration procedures, and they want every single step of the way validated. So that pushed us to create new equipment for them to be able to optically place certain targets to validate their position and make sure the calibration was going correctly. It was definitely a challenge because they had very tight tolerances. So we, spent some time, got it to work. But now the way that we have made the system with the 900, all of our current i900 users can easily get the certification from Rivian and get our targeting system and become an OEM certified shop through Rivian using the AUTEL equipment.
Wow.
So it's given them a path to be that certified shop for the OEM.
And I think they needed options. They're in that scale mode. I think they're coming out with new models that's going to be more price conscious. They're going to sell a lot of vehicles, and servicing these vehicles is going to be a major problem. So, and I think they looked at, our reach into the market, what we're trying to do. And it's been a very, very great relationship. So great people to work with. Again, we're just proud to have been accepted, and we're glad that our AUTEL users could have a choice, right?
Yeah.
Well,
And,
I think the industry's glad they have a choice.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you mentioned too that
OEM's on board too to get on that process. Make us.
Yeah, I wish that's a huge point. I think all of us sit here and say, please,
Yes.
take Rivian's lead,
yeah.
and put a stamp of approval on a system. If it's AUTEL, if it's something else, but do something to show that you are considering that an approval.
All I ask is let it be fair.
Yes, yeah, it's that big.
At least some of that, we just want an opportunity to Holy Falls for her. Even the OEMs, I reach out to every OEM all the time. They know who I am. So I'd love a callback from all of them. Right. And so certain ones are very receptive.
Okay, guys. So final wrap up here. As I sit here, Fortunately, I got rid of my '09 Honda Civic with 220,000 miles, and I am in an ADAS car now. I've had been for 2 years, so I'm experiencing this technology on a day-to-day basis. I used to read about it. I used to write about it. I used to edit it. Now I'm living it. I've got kids who have ADAS that's supposed to protect them. I feel better sitting at this table with you guys. I feel better about the collision industry because this is important stuff. So just thoughts from each of you on the future, what we're looking at. How, you guys are the best of the best, but how do we uplift the industry, and how do we make sure that, to you guys' point, we're not just protecting the occupant of the vehicle, we're protecting all of the vehicles around them. So just final thoughts kind of on where we're going as an industry and how you all can uplift everybody.
So here's my final thought. I would say when you think about collision, and that's what we primarily focused on today, the average collision experience happens every 7 years. So that's when we're going to be involved in having to deal with a collision center. In that 7-year period, how many times do you take your car for service? How many times do you take your car in for some other automotive need? Let's not lose sight of the impact to those segments of the automotive industry with ADAS and the technology that exists there, because it is so much more significant than the collision piece. We're the best at it at collision today, but the automotive centers that are not doing it today, the tire shops, the alignment shops, the corner service providers, aftermarket third-party service providers, they're not focused on it, and they need to be. And I think us as ADAS leaders have to lift ourselves out of collision exclusively and be for the good of the whole automotive industry. When James started this conversation and brought it to you, our conversation was, how do we get a voice around ADAS? Because there's a lot of people saying things as individuals, but there isn't an ADAS voice. And I don't want ADAS to be wholly tied to collision, because it's so much more than that. It impacts so much more that cars are in for service so much more frequently than they are in for collision service.
It's a great point.
Future, I really want the OEMs to come to the table and help us some. Feels like you're on an island sometimes. You don't have that direct person you can get to. In collision side with 26 dealerships behind me, I know all the engineers for the collision side. You know how many ADAS ones I know? One. That's frustrating. We need that lifeline, and we might not go have beers with them on Tuesday or go to the baseball game with them, but when we need something, we can get to them. We had a really crazy Mazda one, and it took 3 weeks to get answers from the OEM. You know what the final answer was? Yeah, you're going to have to try to find a couple used blind spots because we don't have a fix for this. So the car was going to total unless we could find, or the shop could find, used blind spots. I mean, how much sense does that make? But that's my biggest thing is, just some help from the OEMs and a voice, the correct voice coming out of ADAS.
I would love to see some more specifications, some more direct paths to finding service information and values and testing procedures. That would help the shops, the technicians know when to calibrate. There's less guesswork about how long it's going to take. Can I get paid for it? All of that will help the ADAS industry kind of find its footing, become standardized. That's what we need.
Do you think there's any shops out there, body shops, that never even heard the word calibration? I hope not, because body shop business reaches a lot of repairers out in the country. We talk about it every single issue, but there are.
I still run into it, yes, Jason, for sure. There's people that, we talked about pre-scan, post-scanning in the beginning, and they're doing that, but that's all they're doing. They're like, yep, there's no codes. We're letting the car go because that's, the pre-scan is clean, the post-scan is clean, it's good. But we said it before, ADAS is half electrical and half physical, so there's a whole other aspect to identifying when to do these calibrations.
Half physical, half electrical. It's my next article title. There you go. I love that.
Okay, there you go.
It's kind of like the $6 million man.
That's right. That's right. Everything's coming full circle here. Stuart, final thoughts.
I totally agree. I love the OEMs who come together, standardization. Would love to help in any of that regard. I mean, we're part of lots of groups, UTI and others, CIC. whatever it takes to come together. I want of technicians. We need into this whole industry. We need to give them tools for success. You need to show them that these are careers, that you can come into this industry and have a career, right? The skills part of this whole country, I feel like it's coming together. I'd love to see it really grow. So that's my take.
So, I think the future of the ADAS calibration industry is really going to be defined by a very big, strong market expansion with the influx of AI, cloud-based software. Things are going to affect your repairs. You're going to see a very probably strong tightening of regulatory frameworks. That is going to affect all things. But I think that, what's not going to go away is the need for precision and accuracy in the skill set of technicians to be able to do these things. I think looking at statistics and saying that the average vehicle in the car park is 12 and a half years old, the average repairable vehicle is 7 years old. Okay, so today, as we sit right here, we have the equipment manufacturers that is making equipment to fix the 2024 and 25s. That is the same equipment, essentially, that is going to fix that same car in 7 years, 8 years from now. Okay, but there's going to be a lot of changes that come into play, variables that need to stay on top of that. So I think from a standpoint, we have a very solid, good foundation to be able to handle and anticipate changes in order to pivot. But it's just going to be the embracing for further technology and really leaning into it and making sure that there's a collaboration between all members, all people at the table, because our customers and our families, that's what they demand, and that's our responsibility.
Regulation and standardization will be the two driving factors for the safety of tomorrow, hands down. Bar none, nothing will compare. There's nothing that we can do except continue to push that narrative up the food chain until it gets distributed and delineated from the top. Some states, my home state of Utah is one of them. We had mentioned earlier that some states are, not failing vehicles on visual inspections because there's rust available and it's a, 6-year-old's cutting hazard. And, the fact that I have to bring this up as an issue to standardization is ridiculous, but in Utah, they've done away with the visual inspection. There is no visual inspection. And transversely, it's legislated that if you replace your glass, you have to recalibrate front windshield, like it's a state law. So, again, where's the consistency?
For years, and way before ADAS, at these CIC meetings, they talked about, well, maybe the government should get involved. Everybody went, whoa, wait a minute. No, look at what they've done with the other things, right? But I hear you talking now. I wonder if one of these days, that's going to happen because these cars are just getting too sophisticated.
I think if you get to self-driving, I think it almost has to have some kind of validation other than, no offense, Vinny, Uncle Vinny's garage, one-man operation says, yep, I calibrated.
Yep, it's all good.
Didn't do nothing.
Yeah.
So I think if we get to that point, there's going to have to be some kind of regulation or verification that it was done correctly.
The governments can step in and say that banks are too big to fail. If there's a network of vehicles that are all talking to each other, that are in charge of thousands of lives on the roadways at any given time, as far as I'm concerned, that's too big to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the regulation?
Yeah.
You're right. This is a new industry. It's very exciting. Whoever thought that the kid working in Geek Squad at Best Buy could find a job in the collision repair industry? And Josh, I've been real impressed with you. I mean, you are a bright, shining light. You're a very smart guy, young guy. Your boss, Andy, talked highly of you, and I see why. So, I mean, you give me hope for this industry and the ADAS industry in general. So, we need to run with this, I think, and just really sort of galvanize together. And we talk about, we need to get together, and fragmentation has been a hallmark of the collision industry for a long time. It's very hard, but I think this issue, as pressing as it is and relating to the safety of everybody, might just bring us all together. So guys, we've talked about a lot of things, talked about a lot of information. Repairers need access to information. What are the resources out there that they can get this information, they can get this training? Start with you, Josh.
I think there's some really great resources available to people interested in the ADAS industry. I think any body shop where they have ICAR certifications will be a great resource. They'll pay for your education, and any of us sitting at this table are probably hiring. We're all expanding, and we're all interested in people who want to get their hands on this type of work without necessarily being covered in oil at the end of every day. So I think it's really great to see more information pour into an industry that's probably had a stagnation of interest.
That on the ICAR. We partner with ICAR with a lot of things. Also ASE, there's training over there on that side. We offer 2-day training classes to build the technician up. Also, we talk about a lot of the business side. How do you set your business up for success? There's a piece of that you need to understand, and it's more than just how much space do you have, right? So lots of resources available. Tooling manufacturers help. ICAR is huge. ASE, and I'm sure there's lots of others that could help out.
Your local trade schools are now starting to get interested in understanding this segment of the repair as well. So you're starting to see some ad hoc development of courses, night classes, where they're bringing local repairers back into the trade schools to learn this particular segment because it's an addendum to what they learned 20 plus years ago when they went through the initial program.
And I agree with everybody else. I mean, ICAR's about the best thing that we got out there right now. We have companies come to us that we put them through a 2-week training course in-house and just kind of, give them the down and dirty on it. And there's a few OEMs that I think have a couple of your previous employer, but there's a few that have some programs. But again, you got to kind of be in the industry already to get into some of those. So.
Yeah, I think ICAR, like we said, ASE, the new ADAS course is a really good one. More on the technical side, gives the technician more of an understanding of the system overall. But between those two, our training course that AUTEL offers gives technicians a really good start. And then, obviously, continued learning, seminars, things like that is where they want to go.
Yeah, it's a new day. We're in an industry of continual learning, We're not fixing our fathers' or grandfathers' vehicles anymore. And, I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what I'm doing is irrelevant anymore, unfortunately. It's a very sobering fact for some technicians to realize that all of their experience might amount to jack squat today. But we're in an industry of continual learning. So thank you guys for the resource information.